as I said, it's evolved with me, and I'm slowly starting to learn what's actually helpful for the type of person that I'm trying to help. So it's always trying to figure out a way for us to transition to a place where they are just being regular, healthy people.
That's, I just, as you were talking there, I remembered something that happened when we worked together. That was also the time that you decided to make a change in your own dietary choices.
Yes.
And I was just like, great. Thanks for making this so much
on your toes, mate.
easier for me. So just for accuracy, you decided to become, was it vegan or vegetarian?
Vegetarian at the time.
Vegetarian at the time. Have you gone further now into being vegan?
I've been vegan. Now I'm back to eating meat.
You're back to, okay, wow, yeah. Hold on.
A lot of people listening to this won't know that. Well, yeah.
Okay, wow. All right. So what's happened there? What's gone on?
Yeah, sure. So my brother turned vegan maybe 10, 12 years ago. He was very passionate about it. And the typical vegan stereotype, look at what you're doing. Watch this video. Right. Got my mum into it, and living with my brother and my mum, them turning vegan, and then getting the little comments when you're cooking your meat and things like that. And then naturally you start watching these things, and obviously it's not nice watching the production of meat and what happens to animals.
No.
Especially when it's off of when it's really bad stuff and how they're treated. So it does put you off a bit. And so I transitioned into vegetarian, went vegan, and then over time I was vegan for 4 or 5 years, but I realized that I felt the same throughout. When I turned vegan, people say you feel better, you feel worse, or what happens. I can honestly say I felt constant the whole way through. It just depended on the quality of foods I ate, of course, but I always kept my quality fairly good and my quality fairly high. But then I started getting to a point where, in order for me to reach my targets with my goals, let's say, so eating a certain amount of protein and pursuing my fitness goals, so obviously building muscle at the time or whatever, I found myself eating loads of soy burgers and processed meat replacements and things like that. And I thought, nah, it just didn't feel right with me. All this man-made food that come from a factory, I was just like, this probably isn't helping my health. I don't agree with that. I don't think you need to be a scientific to know that a soy burger mixed with loads of ingredients which you can't see, made in a factory, having 4 or 5 burgers every day in order to hit your protein target, that just didn't sit right with me. So I thought, all right, let's go back to eating meat. But I make sure that when I do eat meat, obviously on the off time where I'm just grabbing something in a shop or something, it'll probably be just something from Sainsbury's or Tesco's or whatever. But I try to make sure that all of my meat is from the best possible sources. So I currently live in Windsor at the moment, on Maidenhead, and I sound a bit snobby here, but I shop at the Windsor Farm Shop. Wow. Yeah. So yeah, all of it's produced from the farm, and they live a good life, or as good as they can, life the animals. And obviously it still is in my mind knowing that I'm eating meat or whatever. I'm going back and I still think about it from time to time, but I think when you weigh up the cost and the benefits, I feel better eating this form of protein or meat or whatever. So,
all right. Well, that's yeah. I guess I don't know how much of a thing that all is. The whole sort of not eating meat, being vegan. At a certain point, it felt like it was quite intense, and it was a big topic. Yeah. I think maybe since COVID and since a bunch of other things have happened in the world, some of these topics have kind of been downgraded a little bit in terms of intensity, and people aren't as loud or vocal about that stuff anymore. I'm sure people still feel a way about it, but yeah, it can vary so much, people's experience. You saying that you didn't feel different, you always felt well, doesn't surprise me, right? What tends to happen when somebody becomes a vegetarian is they're forced into eating fruits and vegetables all of a sudden. They're forced into eating more whole foods. They're forced into, eating more nutrient-dense foods that they didn't have in their diet before. And then naturally, as a result, they will start to feel a bit better, right? They've got a lot more fiber coming in. Their body just responds well to nutritious food as does everybody's. I'm a meat eater. In the sense, when you say meat eater, imagine like people immediately they just picture you eating steak all day, every day, right?
Yeah.
I actually very rarely eat red meat, but I'm just not opposed to it. But is it practical for me to do that often? Not really. I don't actually eat chicken that often now that I think about it, but, often enough. I'll eat fish more than anything else, just because at this stage of my life, I kind of like that. Mostly, if you're doing training, even if you're not like a fully fledged bodybuilder, everyone's like, lifting weights and doing resistance training, you need some muscle. You're going to have a slightly above average protein intake. And it's quite challenging to do that, off of tofu,
soy burgers.
It helps if you've got a much wider variety of options to consume protein with. When you said it didn't sit right with me, and you didn't mean that literally at that moment in time, but speaking quite literally in terms of, when you were eating all these soy burgers and everything, did you kind of like feel like you digested them well enough? Did you have any sort of like issues? Did you have any sort of bloating? Did you have any trouble with going to the toilet, anything like that? Or was it just perfectly fine in the end?
It's funny you mentioned it, actually, because I forgot about this, but there was a point where I was just eating all of these foods which I mentioned, and I was feeling fine, but I got to a stage where do you know of Seitan?
Seitan. Yeah, it's only because it's such a weird name, and I remember Googling it. Like, I made this nutrition database for my clients, like loads and loads and loads of different things. And one of the things I had to do is look up protein sources that were like a vegetarian and vegan. And this thing, Seitan, came up.
Yep.
I'm like, what the hell is this? And I still, to this day, have no clue what the hell Seitan is, or just,
okay,
it looks like a block of cheese or something.
Yeah. So Seitan is basically made from wheat gluten. And per 100, because I was obviously focused on the numbers back then, and I was looking for a high protein source as a vegan, and per 100 grams of wheat gluten flour, it was 80 grams of protein. So I thought I hit the gold mine. So here I was making my own, making my own seitan, because it's fairly easy to make. And all I would need is like 150 on top of everything I was having to reach a decent enough protein target. So there was a point where I was just hammering this every single day because of its ease, accessibility. For like, you could buy a kilo of wheat gluten flour for $5 on Amazon and just make it up. So when I'd meal prep myself there, but I think up until the point where I decided to change, go back to eating meat again, I was hammering down wheat gluten, and I think I have to pin. I think it was that, but that really affected my digestion. I think it's almost the timing is too close to counter out.
We won't go down into the route of demonizing Seitan, no pun intended. Terrible joke. But yeah, Seitan is a weird high protein vegan option. I've never had it, and yeah, potentially if you're consuming too much of anything,
Yes.
and there's this, anybody listening to this, there's way too many variables that go into why your stomach feels a certain way when you eat something, and it's really hard to pinpoint what exactly that is. And the only sort of thing I usually tell people is not to completely write off a food or a food group, but just understand that dosage matters, much in the same way we look at lifting weights. If you go to do an exercise, you wouldn't start an exercise at 100 kilos. You might start an exercise at 10 and gradually build up as you get stronger. Your body will adapt to it, and maybe eventually you'll be able to move that, whichever that exercise is, maybe eventually be able to move 100 kilos. Much in the same way with food, even when we're trying to get healthier, we're going from a very unhealthy diet to quite a healthy diet, slowly introducing fiber and healthy foods just to allow our bodies to get used to it, and therefore we get less of that sort of like bloating and gassy and like having weird problems with going to the toilet and all that other kind of stuff. It tends to be a smarter option, but as soon as we get like one bad experience, immediately, because it's popular to say this now, like I've got an intolerance to that. Like you might do, but you probably, you've eaten like a large amount in one go out of nowhere. Yeah, of course it was going to be an uncomfortable experience, and you can be a bit smarter about it, I think. That's not really the message that seems to be getting out there at the moment. It's easier for people to look at things as very black and white, and much in the way, I guess, vegans and meat eaters look at everything as black and white.
Yeah, of course.
And it's very rarely actually ever black and white, and we are so different. There's too many variables with each individual to know, is this the best option or is this not? And unfortunately, the burden is on you as the individual to kind of trial and error. What is the best way for you to be eating? And that can even just change with age. It can change with location. Maybe you're in Windsor one day eating the best quality foods, and next thing you end up in Leeds. Not to knock Leeds, but I don't know. I'm just making an assumption there.